new microphone solution this week that we're going to try. Seems to work.
And that's for all the people that might be
Live
watching.
stream.
Good.
That's because it could not be the village microphone store. I know not.
Lucky for us, he
And
just-
we do or do not have video.
We have video.
Have
Video's
video.
running,
Cool.
video's using that microphone, and we are audio recording on that. It'll all be on the website.
Cool.
I swear I heard cheers all over the village.
No.
By popular demand. By
More like
popular
that.
demand.
More like from the 40s.
I think you're,
Well-
I think you may be delusional.
It wasn't even advertised last week. We were just testing it. We had
Four people watch it.
Oh, did they?
Really?
Well, one was me, so.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Got it up there, perfect.
6 people watched last week's. 6.
How many were you?
Just one.
So we know who two of the 7 were.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so let's see if I can do this. So just going around the room. This helps me remember names, so I appreciate your humoring me here. Jess, Shelley, Deb, Nina, Jen, Brian, Pam, Dick, Paul, Kelly, Evan, myself, whom I've forgotten before. All right, perfect. And Sid did send me an email saying that he would be late, but he does anticipate coming. All right. Awesome. Thank you for humoring me. So, first item on the agenda, minutes from previous meeting. Evan had sent out minutes and then updated minutes.
I think I updated twice. And I sent the final one, I think, to Brian. That's where I merged your minutes in there too.
It's so much more formal.
I thought it was beautiful.
Oh, it's great. I'm not complaining in
Yeah.
any way.
Template from the
I know,
village council, so.
losing the relaxed feeling.
But it looked good.
Okay.
Much appreciated for the effort.
Yeah,
All
this is
right.
great.
So, any questions or concerns, or if we move to approve this?
So, second.
All right. And Brian will post those on the site. Okay. All right. So before we go on to
We have to
Yeah,
vote.
we have to
Just
vote.
call.
It's been moved and seconded.
all right.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for keeping me straight. Takes a team.
And then you ask for, nays if they were.
I don't think there.
Well,
It was
but
just
there
say
may be
it
at
was-
some point.
Any
Oh, you want to pick up?
names?
I'm being asked how to access the live stream. Is it just on the village website?
No, it's on
So
Minerva.
if they go to minervaparkcharter.com and click the live stream link there, that's the easiest way. That you're,
That was so cool. Having to, yeah. I do love.
So we moved to approve, we approved, we voted, any nays? Good. All right, so before we move on to going to items from the previous meeting, actually, no, let's just do that. So let's go through the action items from the previous meeting for updates. The first two I have on the list are me. So the first one was to make a project plan for required items, deadlines, dates, start putting that together. I still owe you that. I did not get that done. Got it started, had a week, has not been done yet, so that is still open. Following up on emails though, that did come to fruition finally. We all have village email accounts now. I've got the list here. There are instructions, I'll just send them to your non-village email account that you actually can access. And if you have any issues, questions, or concerns, you can reach out to Brian and I. We've both managed to do it successfully. You have a temporary password, have to reset it immediately, and then you're in. You just can't do it from this building. And those were my two action items. Any questions on those? And I can pass around the sheet with emails, I just don't want to grab them all out.
You know, I might look at that sheet again. Sometimes with a hyphenated last name, sometimes the hyphens get in and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Yours is there.
Is it,
And do you have that blue note card?
I do.
Okay, good. Add your password on it. It's very warm in here. All right. Next action items. Technology. Brian, you had done a how-to session for OneDrive before the meeting today.
Yep, Pam, I helped Pam get in, but we didn't really get through anybody else, but I'm available, so just let me know. I did share the OneDrive folder to everybody's village email, so once you log into OneDrive, so what you'll need to do, the easiest way to explain is if you go to the OneDrive website, or you just Google OneDrive, it's a Microsoft product, you'll create a new account using your village email account as your associated email, and once you've logged in, it'll show up under shared stuff.
So I can't use the one that
If you already have a OneDrive account,
I don't.
okay,
I just.
you've been
bookmarked
using that
yours.
link, it'll work a
Yes.
lot better if you
If I
create a
create
OneDrive
one.
account, yeah.
And the beauty is, no matter which account we would use, what's in there is exactly the
What's
same.
in, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I did update the contact sheet with everybody's Minerva email.
After I create the new account, what do I do with my new email? What do I do after that?
It'll take you to a page.
I'll be right
You'll
there.
be right
Okay.
there.
All right, any questions on the technology front?
You know, the approved minutes are now on the website.
I think. All right. I believe that takes us to you. You had some continued follow-up on some legality questions. How'd it go?
All right, I'm actually gonna address the second one first. I called Gene. I will admit I did not call him until today. I left a voicemail. That's as far as I've gotten with that. Then jumping back, that's kind of a generalized action item I was covering, I guess 2 or 3 different things. I got an email back from the municipal organization with some names that I can follow up with to ask questions that we have about what our legal requirements are. I did not email them. That came in yesterday. I have not emailed any of them because I thought it might make more sense for us to have some specific questions rather than just, hi, my name is Kelly and I don't know how to do a charter. Like,
Right.
we should have some specific questions. So I don't know if we want to try to come up with those tonight or if we want to just kind of park that for a bit, but I have at least some names from people that I can contact, including one of them that jumped out at me was the law director for Westerville, who was involved in their charter. So that might, because that's so geographically close, and obviously Westerville is larger than us, but I think we might be able to get some good insights from them. And the other thing I was working on, I already got the timeline. I was able to report on that last week. I did I transferred that oath of office over to a single sheet. I printed out 15 copies. There's a notary block at the bottom. I don't know what we want to do with that, whether we want to try to get someone who's a notary here so that we can all fill it out and give our oath at the same time and then just be done, or how we want to do it. But
That makes the most sense.
I think it's not that there are no rules, it's just that there are no rules. Like, we have to give the oath, but there's no guidance really on how you give it, who you give it to, whether it must be verbal or if it can just be in writing, whatever. So what seemed my interpretation of the email that got sent to me from the guy at the elections board, I just took what he sent me, put it on a piece of paper, and put a notary block on the bottom of it. I figure worst comes to worst, we sign it in front of a notary, say it out loud, turn it into the clerk at the elections board, and call it a day. And then I think that obligation will have been fulfilled.
Okay, so
I'm a notary.
Well, I mean, I am too. We just can't notarize our own oaths.
Right.
but you guys
So
can't
between
see
the
the
two-
I mean, I could
But you
notarize
have-
everybody else's, but I wasn't sure if everyone would be comfortable with that because I'm also sitting on the commission.
That's true.
Again, there are no rules that I can find
Yeah.
that says I couldn't take all of your oaths, but I don't know if that makes people uncomfortable or not.
In the
The
front-
mayor is a notary.
Yeah, the
uh,
mayor.
And she will be most likely on Monday here at the community building before the, almost always is early, if we wanted to, see if it's okay, and we just each, stop in and see her and do it.
Why can't we just do it in a meeting with
One of our
Devin
meetings or-
Kelly on Thursday with Devin Kelly doing it? Why can't we just do it?
I'm actually just notarizing that, that's
Yeah,
our
I mean, we
signature.
can.
Right.
So I'll throw out another idea. I think it's probably too late to ask the council for this on their agenda for Monday. But maybe the second regular council meeting of the month, it could be like a nice,
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
get as many of us here for that
Oh.
meeting at the beginning, swear us all in with and it's sort of, it's a little pomp and
And then
circumstance that
Devin Kelly
is,
can get any that
Yeah.
don't, aren't able to
yeah,
do
and
that.
anybody
Fine
who
with
isn't, yeah, that's,
Me or Deb, either one of us.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I think.
I mean, I
I
don't
don't
know
know
if I
what
know.
you said.
So not this coming Monday, but next.
Yes, but someone needs to make
What?
sure
Yeah,
we
the
get it
meetings
on.
are
Is that
there.
pushing
Yeah.
Christmas?
It
There's a
is, it's
meeting
probably gonna be
next
the Monday
Monday and
before
then the
Christmas,
following
or
Monday.
Monday after.
What was,
Hold on, so let's just-
This was the third.
will be the
It'll-
17th.
17th,
so-
so-
Yeah,
we're
so that's
talking-
I thought I had one.
Are there any negative consequences for us not being sworn in as a voter?
Probably not.
No.
No.
We're fine.
We,
It's a wild, wild west.
So we will ask if we can be included on their agenda for the 17th.
What time does it start?
7,
So,
just for a quick swearing, and we can all leave.
I was gonna say, if that could be
For
first,
the
that
agenda?
would be awesome.
I would say email Lynn and Diane, because Diane is president of council, but the agenda is physically created by village administration, so.
Rainey, are you gonna do that?
Yes, I can. Can I have a copy of that, just in case I ask about?
I can email it to you as well if you'd like.
And then anybody who's not comfortable doing that can simply stand before you and sign it. And
Sure.
Or anybody who's out of town.
Or
that-
You don't have to do it, isn't it just a statement saying?
Yeah.
We're just notarizing the signature.
These typers. So, followed up on the oath, we've got the dates that we talked about last week. Were there any other outstanding legal things that you didn't already touch on? You're right, it's kind of a summary action item.
I think I'm good.
All right, so the remaining action items. Let's see here, Pam, Paul, Jen, Dick, and Pam and Nina. So we had talked about doing written feedback requests of certain parties, stakeholders, so council members. You guys were gonna look at a draft of questions that we wanted to get written feedback on. Did you have a chance to get to that?
and I was supposed to do that already, and I haven't. I have time to do it tomorrow, however, and I will email it to the appropriate people.
And I think what we had talked about was having questions that we might send out to former council members. And then I imagine we talked about doing interviews with.
I think we decided for council members we weren't going to, but maybe employees we were going to do.
Yes.
Right, right,
Employees.
but we could do the same
Right.
questions, just it
Right.
would be in more of an interview
Well,
format for employees.
Yeah, and as I say, I think we decided that because we wanted it to be kind of level playing field for our answers and feedback.
Yeah.
Without personality asking council.
Right.
So you're gonna work on that? and
I am.
send it.
I am gonna work on that, and then is anyone else, Pam, Dick, Paul, are any of you village employees like before meetings, before council meetings?
Like during the day,
You're available during the day.
absolutely.
No,
You're not available to do it at all? Are you available at all, like before a council meeting? If, I'm just trying, because I am gonna start calling them next week,
If possible before, not during the day, but.
but before a council meeting.
You said no,
Oh.
village
Employees.
employees, but they won't be here.
Well, I'm just, I'm trying to like, I'm thinking of Kim Pulley specifically, like, just in case this is
Oh,
the
yeah,
only
yeah.
time that she can do it. Because I'm gonna ask them what their schedules are and whether they're willing to do it, if they'll do it, and then message to you guys and say, here's what people have said, here's their availability. And I just wanna put that out there that I can too, but I just wanna make sure.
Anything else on that? Questions, comments? Deep thoughts? No, okay.
Other than
You said you're gonna work tomorrow on drafting the actual questions?
yeah, nobody's gonna get them before like 8 PM, but yes, I will have time to work on it tomorrow. It's not meant to be like my questions. I'm just throwing out options. You guys change, add, delete, whatever.
Just get feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got a list of like 8 questions, which I have not wordsmithed yet. But as I looked at them, it looked like it might be a good way to say, on a scale of 1 to 5.
I see.
So I'll
Yeah,
Get
will you
something in.
email them to
Yeah.
all of us?
I'll try. I'm not sure. We'll get it, depending on the email situation.
Well, you can email it to my personal email address.
Okay.
If you
We'll
have
talk.
to, try to build
Yeah,
up
we'll
one,
talk.
but yeah.
Okay.
And then the goal will be just by our next meeting to have at least a draft so we can all look at them, talk
Yeah.
about it, get feedback from the group at large.
Yeah.
All right, so the other 3 action items were kind of takeaways from our conversation about different kinds of governments that different charters can come up with. So we had Pam and Nina, you guys were going to get a little bit further information regarding the types of government, a little bit more deeper dive on the ones that we thought were perhaps more relevant. Have you had a chance to work on that?
I did, we both did, and we kind of came up with different things. One of the, talking about getting in touch with somebody and have specific questions. One of the things that I would actually like to do is find out a municipality that recently did a charter so that the commission members would be most likely around and it would be fresh in their mind. Because I would like to talk to somebody about how do you actually get started. So what I ended up doing, and I don't know if I have enough copies for everyone, maybe we can kind of share. Nina, did you bring copies of your?
No,
Oh,
I didn't think until we put it on,
Oh, I think we have.
until we put it on, as a document.
it was beautiful. It was, what she had done, what it looked like to me was, looked at 3 of the forms of government and they were each different.
Yes.
And then looking at basically the table of contents in the, of the charter, looking to see where the similarities were. And it was quite amazing to see that actually, the same things were addressed. It's gonna be, then what did they do in that? What I did, was I took the three that I want to look at, and I started to dive into, and I just chose these three because they're in Central Ohio. And once we get maybe Paul's information, we could actually decide what we want to benchmark, if we want, specific ones to benchmark against. What I did was take Grandview Heights, because it's a smaller population, Bexley, which is larger, and then Hannah, which is still larger. And on the far left-hand side, the things that I saw that were addressed in each of the charters was the executive power, and this is just about the mayor. The executive powers of the mayor, the term of the mayor, what were the qualifications for the mayor? They almost all addressed where was the office of the mayor, what's the compensation, what were the general powers and duties, appointing power, etc., all the way down. Almost all of them did. And then I looked at exactly what was it that they said about each one of those. And for instance, you can see that for the most part, they're all the chief executive officers and the chief conservator of the peace. They were all for 4 years. I think Gahanna was the one that I began to see what would be called a strong mayor. We talked about that council mayor form of government. You could have a weak mayor, you could have a strong mayor. Gahanna was putting verbiage in there that to me seemed to indicate that it was a strong mayor. The first thing, they specifically said, this shall be a full-time occupation. None of the others, again, smaller municipalities, talked about is it part-time, full-time, whatever it is. Let's say in Gahanna, it said that the person needed to be an elector of the municipality for 2 years. Everyone else was saying 1. And then where I really began to see it, under general powers and duties, most of the time, I would see that the mayor would make a decision, like to appoint someone or to remove someone, and it was with the consent of council. It was like council was, whatever he or she did,
Either consent
council
or notice.
could, then had to confirm it. So if somebody was appointed to a position, the police chief was appointed, council would have to approve that appointment.
So did you happen to look at a little further in that and see, so this is something they do by vote, like if the mayor decides something, council has to confirm it, it's done by vote. Did they have any specific language for like tiebreakers and things like that?
I'll address it a little bit farther down here. Not in this section. I think we'll maybe get to legislative, because that was one of the things. What I found in Gahanna, again, this idea of having a strong mayor, and I highlighted it on the back, that it looked like the mayor can appoint and shall have powers to remove, and it never goes to their council. She can do that, and that's a strong mayor. Yeah, and then this whole part that is highlighted can go into contracts, can do all these different things, and it seems like the mayor can just do those things. Now we have to talk to find out, and what was one thing that ordinances that were passed by council would go to the mayor for the mayor's approval or disapproval. And I just have never, I didn't see that in any of the others. So it really, by doing this type of analysis across charters, you can really start to see where there can be differences. The couple talked about mayor's court. I didn't see in some. The succession was interesting. They all talk about what the succession is, but then for the most part, council members the president of council becomes the acting mayor, but at Gahanna, any member of council can become the acting
Oh, that's interesting.
mayor.
That state statute is the president of council
Yes,
becomes
yes,
mayor.
yes. And so some municipalities decided not to change that at all. At the very end, it's talking about the rights of the mayor. And all three of these actually said that the mayor can participate in the meetings, but has had no vote at all. And I did not talk about a tie, but I just got the idea that they had no vote. So
Well, that would
it would
make,
be something to look at.
that would make sense if they
Yeah.
approve or disapprove anything that comes through.
Right.
Yes,
That's their
yeah,
vote,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
That's
That's
exactly.
following a more kind of federal model
Yeah,
almost,
it is.
where
Yeah,
the mayor is the executive branch. The executive branch doesn't get to have a vote in the legislature. Now the vice president's an executive.
Right.
So
But there's this one.
what's that on the that? Oh, yeah, at the very last, I didn't highlight that. It was talking about in Gahanna on the mayor's disapproval. So if there's a piece of legislation and the mayor disapproves, as the council may, but not later than its next meeting, consider the legislation and
Reconsider, right?
reconsider it. And because the mayor can change
Override the
things.
veto.
The mayor can actually
Oh,
make
so-
changes to
Look
the
at the
piece.
last line.
So they put another check in there on the mayor at the end, that
That
they
they
could
Override the mayor,
override the
which
mayor's veto.
Yeah.
How many counselors does Gahanna have? So is this is it just need a?
that would be a good thing to put down.
It says that you need 5 or more.
Right,
so-
but then if they have 11 counselors, then 5 is not that big of a deal, but if they have 5
I'm
counselors.
sure they have 7.
Had an odd number, there'd be less chance.
Yeah, no, that would be, yeah, I would, I don't know, I didn't.
If I had to guess, I'd say 7.
Yeah, that's what I
But
figured.
this is it's a good exercise, we just sort of need to somehow figure out, well, what municipalities are we looking at and what are we, looking at within that type thing, so.
How would you characterize the weak mayors in what you found? Did you find much?
Actually, in many of those, it's so much of, similar to what we have now. That, that it's a mayor and council and the,
Weak man.
well, it's just that there's not much that the mayor can do independent of,
right.
council.
And just for the folks at home, it's strong mayor, weak mayor. It's just language encoded in the description. It doesn't have anything to do with the person. It has more to do with the role and how much power that role independently has.
Right.
Are we streaming now?
We are.
I think it might be well, if people are watching for the first time, that somebody defines strong mayor and weak mayor. So that the people that are hearing this for the first time are saying, what?
So I would advise that people can figure that out on their own. They're watching our meeting. Our previous meeting where this was discussed was also streamed. I don't think we can stop and look to the camera and break the fourth wall every time there's a difficult concept to explain to people.
It was very
It's a
easy
bad
to
precedent.
find, it was very easy to find charters, and so people could, if they wanted to, go and read Gahanna's
Those
charter.
descriptions are available at our website.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
are.
Yes.
And
I was
we
gonna
did talk about it a lot.
I still think it's worthwhile to mention that we're talking about the powers of the mayor and not the personality.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yes. So,
Yeah, and that's why I want to call that out specifically, because Pam had said that's what we have now, and I just want to point out it's the form that we're
Yes,
talking about,
that's
not particular persons.
Pam, you done?
I am done.
I'd like to chime in now with
Yeah.
my part.
Oh, yes.
We never had time to see each other, so we thought we might try to come up with something that was standardized that we both did, because we randomly chose 3 communities to do. And we never were able to do it, so she went down her road and I went down
Right.
mine, but we have 2 different things that we've discovered. I chose Johnstown, which is a village, Pataskala, which is considered a city, and Pickerington, which is considered a city. Johnstown's population is virtually twice ours. It's 4,632 people. That's the closest of any of the ones that we chose. And I don't think there's anything smaller on there either, maybe Buckeye Lake. But other than that, and that was rural, so we kind of threw it out because we didn't think it made sense for us. I also looked up the demographics for each one of those communities. And again, Johnstown Village their demographics is homogeneous. It's 97% white. There's not an enormous amount of, at least racial, ethnic diversity there. I don't know what ours is, if we even know. But the other thing that that just by, and I chose this intentionally, 3 different kinds of government, forms of government. Johnstown, the village, was council manager. Pataskala was council administrator, mayor, council administrator, and Pickerington is mayor, council, city manager. And there's a distinction between the 3 of them. And each one of them, I identified when their charter was initially adopted. And for Johnstown, it was 1997. For Pataskala, it was 1998. And there's been updates over time for Pickerington. Initially, it was 1980. It was readopted in its entirety by voters at their general election in 2000. And then there's been another general election in 2010 that it got readopted. So they have varying historical levels of evolution among the 3 of them too. So each one of the charters has articles and sections. It seems that 10 is the magic number. There's 10. So the 3 of them, the Johnstown and Pickerington, each had 10 articles. There was a wide diversity of subsections. And they're generally side by side the same with some level of detail. So the bigger the city, the more the need for the detail. I think it's worth mentioning that there's whole sections on the mayor, the city manager, and the administrator. So they've got their own articles, which goes into great detail, which is one of the things that we seem to be concerned about. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that I sort of went down to, because I remember this is something that we discussed, the issue of charter review after it should be passed, after it's passed, and then the how to make amendments. And I identified those in my chart as well. I think we're sort of getting the idea. And in one of them, in the Pickerington one, it went into detail about what the duties would be of the Charter Review Commission. So we have a lot of available template and experience available to us. What we don't have is anything that's really recent and anything that's our size. Because these are big enough that I didn't look, and I will look if it's something that we are interested in, to see if how many commissioners there are, how many council people there are, and if these are all full-time jobs. I don't know. I didn't look that part up. Did you happen to look at any aside from the 3 you had, Pam?
I didn't.
I only looked in detail of these. I think that what we're seeing is we can mine a lot of material, and I'm willing to put the time and energy into it if we can narrow down what it is we're seeking. But we're clearly, there's lots available to us. We just have to start to continue to narrow our focus down so we're mining what's useful to us at our size at this time in the evolution of our form of government. That became very obvious this time, and it wasn't hard at all to find any of those. It was very easy.
I feel like I do want to explore a couple more. I know there are other villages that are our size, but like you said, they're rural. But like I'm thinking specifically of Yellow Springs, which is like a hotbed of political dissent. And I feel like this is a hotbed of political dissent. There's more in common between Minerva Park and Yellow Springs than there is, like Minerva Park and Pataskala. Yellow Springs is about the size of Minerva Park, number one. And everyone there got really angry about the form of government, and they created a charter.
So you feel it's as politically active as the
It
population
is.
in Minerva Park?
That's correct, and yeah, I mean, I obviously they're not going to have to worry about adding things into their charter to deal with behemoth neighbors, right? They're not going to have to do that, but
So I kind of want to break in with a little bit of a tangent right now. This is something I think that we're circling around a little bit. It was brought up briefly either the last meeting or the meeting before about needing more demographic data about our own village, and we ran out of time at the end of the meeting, so we had to kind of park it. And also kind of hand in hand with that, it has now been brought up a couple of different times about how some municipalities are specifying that their mayor is full-time as opposed to part-time. So we're talking about a lot of things like, well, okay, this place is rural and so its charter isn't relevant to us. This place has twice as many people as Minerva Park, so they're obviously dealing with stuff that we don't have to deal with. And I guess my brain immediately responds, how do I know that? I know Woodley Road because I live on Woodley Road. I don't actually know the exact number of residents.
Right.
I don't know how much tax revenue comes into Minerva Park. I don't know exactly what the individual budgets are for the different projects that go on from time to time. And I understand that technically all of that information is public record, but I don't know how to find it. I've tried to kind of find it. Now, I'll admit I haven't spent hours and hours and hours, but it seems to me that if we're going to make intelligent decisions on, let's look at this charter versus that charter, let's look at strong mayor versus weak mayor versus city administrator, let's look at, this is kind of zoning plan because, it's for a smaller village instead of a larger village. We need the data to start with. I am asking, how do we get that data?
Just Google Minerva Park, and there are all kinds of companies that break down, I don't know what kind of searches I've done, but it breaks down the general population and makeup
for
and
example,
income levels and.
I just pulled up a datausa.io.
Datausa.io.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I checked they're aggregating data from the 2010 census plus an update, a supplemental ACS survey that happened in 2014. So that's their most recent data is 2014.
So that's a problem.
Well, but you don't get.
MI Homes is what,
But you don't get-
nearly doubling.
Well,
Yeah,
You don't
but
get. You don't get.
we're not gonna get
Unless you
minute
wanna-
by minute
Yeah.
demographic information.
And I understand that, but I
Anywhere.
feel like it's something that we need to at least be cognizant of because we can't say that we can't base all our decisions off 2010 data and ignore the fact that the village is getting
Well,
much larger.
I will say that if you don't have a
Based on the
choice,
size of the new community.
then
Sure.
you may not have a choice.
We already have
Okay.
1,200 residents now, approximately. Say we're gonna have 2,000, we could pick a number like 2,000.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a number we can probably go with.
So I mean, I think that your point is valid. I just don't know that we can do anything about it.
Okay.
I mean, we can look up and see what's there, but I don't know that we can create new data. We don't have time to create new data.
Right. Okay.
Well, but if we
We can see
got
what's
to
there.
some municipalities we really want to look at, we could get very specific data about those municipalities. But you're saying we almost need to know the data before we pick the municipalities.
I'm saying we need to make sure we know as much as we can about ourselves before we try to compare ourselves to
Well,
everybody
that was a
else.
question I was thinking earlier, hearing all these great comments, because I love both of your presentations were great.
Yeah.
But it made me think of, well, what do we have?
Right.
I
That's
look- I-
exactly-
and
yeah.
I think may not be what the council member, you guys have been council members before. I look at it as I thought it was more of a strong mayor, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's a mix of the two. I don't have a good feel myself for what we currently have. And I would need the former council members probably to tell me, based on your dealings with the mayor and the council, how things work now, because I don't fully understand.
So-
I think we've already got that in place with the interviews and the questionnaires. We're gonna,
Well, and
at least on the administrative end of things.
I was gonna say maybe at a high level, can we do just literally at a high level, here's what people have, kind of like what you were trying to do, but you were just looking at mayor. Instead of looking at just mayor, can we look at all the different charters and villages, whatever, all the different charters and see what they have, like, mayor, strong mayor, council, whatever, and just that high level. Here's what they have at each one and compare. I think that would give you a little bit of a better feeling for what we have.
Yeah, I think knowing,
Instead, I know
to
you
his
have to
point, I think knowing what's on that website and what the rules of how council works and how what the purse strings that the mayor has or the council has to do things. That's to me where the power is in the money.
So you've been waiting on this page.
Yeah, can we basically try to identify what those powers have been or are now before because in other words, what powers does our mayor have now?
Right.
Now, is it written down somewhere or is it not
Yeah,
written?
I mean, it's the state, it's
But,
Ohio
but is
statute.
is that person then, doing those things or that they actually, I think, and I agree that we need to look at ourselves.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Also, yeah, so everybody is on the
So,
same page of,
so
Yeah.
maybe an analysis of what the statute form of government is in comparison to the options available through charter. Is that what I'm hearing we're asking for?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
just
that's
like the,
boiling it
just a
down.
very simple,
You can put me down and take it away and I'll develop an analysis like that.
Well, I'd like to reply to what the two of you said. We started, Pam did the work to get the Central Ohio municipalities. So we started with Central Ohio. Okay, well, now we can see that perhaps we can do something different because we started with with that part because we're close to
That
it.
makes sense.
So now maybe it's time to go, and I'm willing to do this, to pick 3 villages in Ohio. And that might have a little more things in common, and I'll do exactly the same thing that I did for what I chose. Because I think you're right. I think that we do need, and it seems to me that it'd be a little out of date because we're getting ready to have a census.
Yeah.
But I think we ought to start with that. The census data is typically available that gives you all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. So let's get that. I mean, I'll look into that too. I'll try to dig up some stuff because it
Right.
would help us. We can guesstimate a little bit about it. Surely somebody's keeping track of the MI homes that have been sold.
Right.
How many people have moved in there? I mean, if nobody but MI, somebody's looking into it, right? So
Yeah, the village actually has those.
They have the numbers sold, but not, I don't know that they would have.
how many residents.
Oh, yeah, how many residents, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna interrupt for a second. Brian, the charters that Brian's put are very good. I printed 3, Yellow Springs because it's council manager. New Lex is mayor, council, administrative director, and Brooklyn Heights is just mayor. So that's what I've been reading, is other people's charters. And it's really kind of boilerplate.
Yeah.
It's really boilerplate. Just,
Yellow Springs is a problem because there's a college in town and there's a philosophical difference.
oh, I'm not looking at it to say
Yes.
this is good. I'm just saying,
It's different.
I started with
Different
these
place.
to compare the differences, that's all.
Oh,
But I like
okay.
And what they
But
said.
but the results of what they came up with though will be affected by the fact that it's a college town, the town itself.
Oh, yes, I'm not
Yeah.
advocating for
Yeah.
any of these. I'm just saying, if you're looking for a place to start, and Grandview, for example, very easy to get to. I looked up their law director because I was thinking of recommending her to you. And it says right in there, established in the charter of Grandview Heights, and it's blue, and you click on it, and the whole thing comes right up. So they're all easy to get to. What you might find is, what section are we gonna deal with first, and what kind of information do we get first?
So I think it would probably be a worthwhile endeavor, I'm crazy, but I think it would be a worthwhile endeavor to filter out, I mean, I broke it down in my head as the boring stuff and the not boring stuff, right? But
Yeah.
filter out the boilerplate from this is gonna take more to chew on, right? And
Yeah, that's a.
low hanging
good
fruit, we
point,
can
too.
knock out some of those boilerplate ones pretty
Yes.
quick once we've identified them.
I'm wondering, I mean, I feel like we're sort of circling around asking the same questions in different ways.
Yeah.
And bridging on what Shelley said, I mean, if there are generalities, if there are boilerplate things, we could have the foundation of a charter in place by our next meeting. If we're just pulling out the boilerplate and then plugging in what we need in various parts of it.
Yes, no, we have to decide, are we going with mayor, council, or are we
That's
going?
the
with-
question, yeah.
But
Is
not
there
all of the charter is contingent upon that.
That's exactly, yeah, not all of it is
I
contingent.
mean, I'm not saying
That's
we
true,
need to
that's
write an
true,
entire
that's
charter. I'm
true,
saying
that's
we can put a framework in place and
Yeah.
then hang things from it rather than just sort of grabbing and seeing what we can grab from various.
Yes.
And when
That's
Kelly
what
gets
it's
a hold of some of these people, or they get a hold of people that have worked on the charters, you're a lawyer, you know that they have forms, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that might help a lot.
How many council members do we currently have?
So, okay, currently, they're high.
Positions are actually council members.
By statute, at 6.
You know, that number.
Somebody has to break it
I
down.
don't like that number
I
Right.
don't either.
Should be odd.
because,
Should be on.
Yeah, I don't know why it's
It
not
should be
on.
not.
yeah,
In statute, I don't know. why
because
it's
there
not
has
on.
to be a tiebreaker. And as things stand, the mayor breaks the tie.
Okay, so, so we have 6 council members now, we don't necessarily like an even number. We would like to see,
That's
we would
true.
like to recommend an odd number.
Yeah.
So that should we ultimately say the mayor has the executive power to veto or something, the council can turn around and get a majority vote to override it, if that's what we end up doing. So do we like 5, do we like 7? Is there, is there,
I think some of that goes down to population, right? Because let's face it, if you wanna have 13, but you've got a small enough population that you're never gonna fill 13, then
we're forever
Right.
having vacancies, it seems, so.
So like, what's the minimum, I guess, is really, I think.
Something like that, because how many people really want to take on the duty, and I assume it's gonna be an unpaid role, as it currently is for the council
They-
member?
they're paid.
Ryan used to have hair.
It's $50
50
$50 a month.
$50 a
You might
month,
as well.
which is basically unpaid.
I would like to.
It's actually
along
just
with-
enough.
That's
to
$600.
with the budget,
Yeah.
Yeah.
600.
Okay, I think that's
and
probably.
average income would be
But,
better.
yeah.
It's a good point,
Uh,
yes.
Get some other.
Absolutely.
That's all I
measure.
was trying to get at. was,
Yeah,
Let's look
yeah.
at
So
average
I-
income. Let's look at how many streets do we have, that kind of stuff.
I've got a few things, I've been under the weather all week, been sick, but I do have a few charts that, I don't know if they're.
When I hear you like to make.
Oh, good, the charts.
I know, I'm
Yes.
excited.
I thought you were doing that.
There
I'm
we
so
go.
excited.
There is color and
There's a
everything.
lot of, yeah, just.
Right.
just fast.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So they say it's free to print
Yes.
work.
How, why would you think I would print this at work?
I don't know, because I can't find a
Madam
color
Chair,
printer.
I mean, I print my stuff at work, but
I connected
I
to
own
this, do we have
business,
any action items connected to this?
Yes, so.
So
there's
you
no,
have
there's
boss
no,
and
there's
he
no
says,
one to
okay,
tell me
yeah.
no.
I'll have an action item to compile information for types of government relative to population size,
Okay.
which I think is the path we're heading down anyway, so.
So this just kind of,
Admin.
this is just elaborates on the data that Pam and Nina did last week. So it really confirms a lot of the things that they mentioned. A couple of things I couldn't do, I was gonna try to find the salaries of mayors. That wasn't even possible. There's no database that has, I need a database for me to work, right? So, unless I went into each individual link to the, and I found a couple that I went into and I still couldn't find these out. So just from what I could get you, so the top chart on here, this is by basically the lowest, low population, high population, and the average. If you look at the average, there's not a lot going on here. I mean, this, for all these forms of government, we're talking between 2,000 and 5,000 is the average population. And these are villages, the 76 villages that they introduced last week. These are only villages that have a charter in Ohio.
Okay.
And one thing of note, which is kind of unusual, is there's no, Opetz is the only village in Franklin County that has a charter. That's it. There's nothing in Delaware, there's nothing in Franklin. I thought that was kind of unusual. So if you look at the mayor council, I note here is they go from 79 to 28,000 for the population. That's really the only major spread. Council manager, I highlighted those two because I actually put numbers by those two, because those are the two main that we're talking about. Council manager goes from 1,200 to 4,632. But as far as this, it didn't really tell me a lot. The population doesn't really matter. These are all villages. The population average is very similar among all the forms of government. Even from the mayor council has the smallest and largest. So the variance isn't anything, it's not telling. So going down to the next chart, this is kind of like a Pareto, a cumulative chart. And this basically is saying that the mayor council and the council manager is basically makes up almost 90% of all the villages.
Yeah.
So this is
Right,
kind of illustrating that, so that 90% of these villages that are chartered in Ohio are used these two forms of government. There's only a few, as you can see, left that have the other style. So I thought that was something interesting, something we should, I mean, we've been really talking about those two main ones. I don't know, at some point we could just say, we could look at these others, but at some point we should probably eliminate some that we don't think we're going to, like the commissioner one, or the ones we talked about, the awards, we talked about last week. On the second page, this is just basically a map of Ohio. Yeah, probably a typing error, yes.
Yeah.
So, this is, I was trying to come up with a way to do rural versus urban.
Mm.
So the blue is just the mayor council, once again, the orange is the council mayor. So you can kind of see, if you look at Cleveland,
They
Cincinnati.
really like their charters.
They're
Council manager should be.
council mayor.
Oh,
I was
Council-
wondering what the
Yes,
difference was
my
between
bad.
mayor, council, and
My
council
bad,
mayor.
sorry.
Council manager, okay.
Thanks for pointing that out. True. So you can see the concentration up in Cleveland, a few in Cincinnati, but for the most part, they're rural. All these villages that have a charter, I would say a majority of them, by looking at this map, are rural charters. I mean, and this you can take from that what you want by looking at the NCA is the wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
The title.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think,
just the wording.
I think though, that means mayor, council administrator, and mayor, council manager
merge
are
those.
more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
I thought about that too. That's something we could merge some of those, kind of group them together.
So I guess let me ask everyone this question. I kind of had at least the sense from the last meeting that everyone agrees commission is not really going to be the right fit for Minerva Park. And it seems, and I think it's extremely unlikely that we would abolish the council and just have a mayor administrator. I think it's probably safe to say that we're not a big enough fish to have a mayor, a council, and a city manager. So can we help ourselves out a little bit here, eliminate all those other options and say, hey, we really need to decide whether we're having a mayor and a council or whether we're having a council and a city manager. Let's just focus in on those two options, figure out which one is better,
I
and
totally
move
agree with
forward.
that
And that's
because
what
we're
we've
rolling
been-
down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We've been saying
I'm gonna
that for
disagree.
3 weeks.
Right. If we're 3 weeks in, but we're
Oh, you
still kind of
disagree?
talking
I'm
about.
gonna disagree.
You do disagree, okay.
I disagree. Now, one of the things that I worry about with a manager and administrator is that they can quit. They can, they can
Well,
quit.
we're not choosing.
I know, but I know. I guess succession is something that I'm worried about. Having people, because when I look at the village, and when I get frustrated because things don't get done, I get frustrated because there aren't the people to do it.
Right.
And it seems like, and we had to hire Eric just because there was more to do with the MI development. But that manager that could also help a part-time mayor, not a full-time mayor, but I agree, not a full-time mayor and a full-time manager, but a part-time mayor and a full-time manager. I don't know,
So you
the
want,
succession
you
what I
want
would be concerned
the
about.
council, mayor, and manager form of government to be considered.
Or have a good reason why it would be, and it could be I'm worried about succession. And it could be that we have a few more council members, and then if, I don't know, what, if the
It
manager
could-
quits, then
it could
one of the
be-
council members has to be manager for a while?
It could be that we place those controls for succession in the language of the charter.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And-
that's how,
and
I mean, that's part of the
So
point.
Pam, to speak to the concern, the mayor can quit today. And if the mayor quits today, there's succession. It falls to the president. pro tem.
But I'm
Right, so-
talking about the people that do the real work.
Well, but the people who do, so you're talking about the village administration,
Yeah, the
the
mayor.
fiscal officer, the.
So who currently does the work in the village now?
Well, that's another question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's divided up. I mean,
Who does the project management stuff, I guess, would be one of the
Well,
ways to put it, because.
the project management stuff, like the overriding, this is our vision, this is where we're going, and I'm initiating this. Even that, I have to say, is a little bit broken up. But essentially, it has been historically and is still currently, even though the current council's trying to change that, it has historically been the mayor
Is the project, yeah.
So,
as the project manager.
So I rephrase, when I say that's kind of a loaded question, I think it's because right now that is the question, is who does what, different people think they do different things, and then new council members come in with different skill sets and everything shuffles again. So it's not defined, is my feeling and my understanding from my limited time here. So I think that what I'm hearing you say, Pam, is let's not just eliminate these right off the bat, maybe there's some validity to them, we should still research them further. Is that,
And, yeah,
We're
I would
going-
just,
Well,
and we don't
I
have to
think she was-
pick them, but I think,
If I can jump in, she was advocating specifically for a third option,
right.
right? I think we can still accomplish a lot of what Kelly was looking to do, because I don't think anybody here has any interest in going with mayor administrator, right? Or commission manager, right? So I think we're down to three,
Down to
right?
3.
You know, I don't wanna
Yes.
do that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I think is a fair
and
way
we're
to
calling
move forward.
administrators and managers the same
Yeah,
thing.
an
Yes.
administrator and a manager
Yes.
is the same thing.
Yes.
Same thing.
I gotta be honest. In my opinion, if the charter is drafted well and the roles and duties of both the mayor and the council, or the manager and the council, are very clearly defined and very clearly separated, I don't see why we would need all 3.
And I think
You
there
know,
might be.
so I feel like it would be because we're just not big enough to have enough administrative tasks that we need both a mayor and a manager, unless we're really insistent on the mayor being ceremonial in nature, in which case why not just have the president of council cut the ribbons?
Well, but I'm thinking that there's gonna be people that need to sign contracts and do things, that if you have council manager and then somehow you don't have a manager, then who is it that is signing contracts and signing ordinances and doing the things that a mayor now does?
If we have a part-time mayor, that mayor may need help. If we go
Right.
full-time.
I think
I'm
right
not
now
sure.
we have a part-time mayor.
I think you'd have a hard time finding a part-time manager.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
that doesn't negate the point that maybe it's valid to research how these different ones have broken out those powers and what's the advantage of them having done so. Even if we don't go that route, maybe that helps us understand the advantage of breaking out the power and having, well, the council doing this or the mayor doing
And you know what,
this.
there's so few
versus
of
the
them.
manager.
I would be willing to look at that the mayor, council administrator, mayor, council manager people, and look and see
There's
how
what,
they're,
5?
there's only
So
5.
there's 5. So
Right.
if we just look
Yeah.
at the cost benefit, it's not that much cost.
And I think we
5
could
versus this,
You know, if we're gonna
56.
just go ahead and not consider that.
And I want to reiterate what Kelly said. I honestly think that the language that we draft in the charter it will address all of these issues, and particularly succession issues.
It'll have to.
It'll have to.
Yeah.
Like, this is the point.
Right.
Yeah, it has to.
Fair enough.
Do you ever anticipate that we would have no one running for mayor at all?
Yes.
Did you envision that in the
Yes.
future?
Yes.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't wanna do it. I don't know.
We've had multiple races where there's only been one
There's
person.
only been one
And
person.
so you only need one fewer person to raise their hand to get to know people.
We have twice as many choices now, though, across the street, but, you know, the other addition.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of having
They
an
don't-
MI, we have
They
a lot
don't
of people.
increase by twice, right? So
No, but I'm saying there are
Hey, it's-
choice of people who might be interested in this community has increased.
Well, I mean, I think I would also point out though that the future is going to be different from the past, and if we have a well-drafted charter where where a person's saying, well, I think I might want to run for mayor, what does the job entail, and they get a real answer,
Yeah.
they'll be
Yeah,
much more
that-
likely to raise their hand.
Yes. And the other thing, the other thing I'll just throw out about that is, I mean, when I first got, I'm not from a city. I'm from rural Ohio. And when I first got here and I realized there were these little entities sitting within a behemoth, I thought, what is the point of this? Like, because you can't even expand your boundaries. So what is the point? And then I sat here for a while and I realized No, these little municipalities in fact do expand their boundaries. It may take them 50 years to get to a size that is, a challenge to the behemoth next to it. But this village has expanded its boundaries now twice. Isn't that correct? Jordan Road was the first expansion, and now the MI development, and councils previous have talked about expanding the borders further still. So I think that it is possible we could have no mayors. I think it's, depending on how we draft this charter and the buy-in we get from the community, people may think, oh, this is a place that's potentially interested in continuing to expand its borders and exerting more pressure on the areas around it. And more people may be interested in running for mayor at a place like that.
So what are our next steps?
I volunteered to do the research on those 5, so we can find out a little bit more about how do they divide out the duties between them.
And I'm gonna try to get data about our own village.
That to me is one of the most important.
No, there's a lot of places to look too. It's, there's a lot more places to look than you think, beyond census.
What kind of data are you gonna be looking for? Like the
How many-
government or the prop?
How many people, how many people live here, if we can get that? I mean, you can get all kinds of stuff from this, demographics from the census. But, you can get socioeconomic data from the, consolidated plan that HUD requires for Franklin County and for Columbus, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I sat on that for the city of Columbus, and I know how that works. There's a lot of stuff you can get, you just have to know where to look.
Sounds like we know somebody knows where to look.
Well, there's something here called Community Research Partners too, and all they do is gather data, and I know the original director there, and I can call her and see what she has to say.
So,
You know,
That'd be
so
great.
you're gonna look up
That'd be
the
great.
Minerva Park demographics, whatever data you can. It's gonna be.
what do you
helpful
think
to
we
us.
should try to get? I mean, I'll try to get anything you want.
I also think it would be valid. There's some of us who maybe are a little fuzzy or not as indoctrinated into the current government form of Minerva Park. Even just a high level of here's
So I was gonna,
what it's gonna be.
I had already raised my hand on that.
Okay, so we've got that covered. Is there anything else that we want to know about ourselves?
I think we should get the current budget and the 5-year forecast.
That'd be great.
I think that would be good.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, both those are on the website,
Really?
but I'll
If you can pull
They
them
are-
up.
I'll pull them and put them in our shared drive so everybody knows where to find them. I think, I don't know how useful it might be, but it might be interesting if we can get the results from the survey that the village just
What's
did.
that?
I think those are on the website now. I think I found them there. Yeah, some of them.
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't looked,
I
'cause-
haven't
but,
looked either.
but if it's out there, I'll throw it in there. If it's not, we should ask the village for that data.
Should ask them why it isn't
Well, 2 different questions.
But no,
I think it is
might
actually
be.
there.
I think it is
I think
there.
I think I stumbled across it from something else.
It's a survey, right?
It should be there. So
Right, those are the things I think we should be.
That's great.
demographics, current government, budget and 5-year forecasts. Anything else? Think of?
I actually think, I'm not sure how you would put this together, but I actually think we should try to get some data on, which is, actually, it's probably easier to get on businesses, types of businesses. And if it's possible to get a 5-year forecast, and the reason I'm saying this is because most municipalities have something written, some statute of some sort that says you can't own a business in this village or in this city. You can't, we have one of those. We have one of those right now. You can, but it can't necessarily be home based. Like this is a big deal, and I think that we need to do a little investigating about businesses because people are going to be more and more working from their homes, either for themselves or other companies. I don't think anything currently on the books affects people who work from their home for another entity outside of here. But
That brings up a good question. So what happens with all the, if we don't put something specifically in the charter, like you're a business, like you can't be a doctor or a vet
Right.
and have people coming to your house, what happens? Are all those ordinances just null and void after the charter gets enacted? I mean, what happens? There's,
No, if we don't address it, it remains as is.
Yes,
So
that
yeah,
was in the
but
language
anything-
of,
anything that we've done in the past in the village, the council, is all still there.
Yeah, we don't need to rewrite all of our ordinances.
Really?
mostly for addressing things that the state told us we had to do it a certain way. And we're now changing the way the state.
like, I know people who bought property right up against Minerva Park, but not in Minerva Park specifically, so they could have their businesses in their homes.
They wanted the bulldozers right there in the front yard.
That's
The bull-
exactly right.
Yeah, no, I know, they have
They-
a bulldozing company.
It's more than just them. It's more than just them. And I think it's worth doing some research.
What are we hoping to get out of that in reference to the charter? It's interesting
What
how
types
it's
of businesses are here and around us now, and what business forecast is there, if any?
And what do you want to address in the charter for those? Like, do you want to write something into the charter saying this is what you can do? Are you
Maybe.
trying to overwrite something, or?
I
do
don't
you-
know,
I don't know
maybe-
where you're
I don't
going.
think charters address that. I mean,
If it's
They
more.
could.
Nina,
They-
well, Nina,
Parking.
look,
We could, but we can't overturn Ohio law. So
Right.
if Ohio says that, you know, they can operate businesses in their homes, we can't say they can't.
Well,
You can't park a truck with your business name on it in the certain places here.
exactly. You can't do
we can
that
define,
for
we
now.
can define.
Right, but that's done through zoning ordinance.
Right.
I guess-
Right, that's I mean, yeah, that's a zoning thing.
I guess the reason I'm asking is.
I don't think a zoning issues are proper charter issues.
We can talk about how the zoning rules may work,
And what is,
but
what's,
we don't need to be
You
doing
don't need to say
specific
what they
zoning.
are.
you can
Right.
define what the zoning commission is, or what,
Right.
that kind of thing, yes, absolutely.
It would be to-
And I was just trying to look through here, and because we have limited time, the reason I was asking was, is it too far to these for what we're trying to?
That's fine, it's fine, it's
But I
fine.
didn't know where you.
Because I
didn't know where
can
you were
look it
going.
up, on my own. I mean, if I find anything, it's mostly just for information, because I'm
Right.
thinking about what happens in the end, not what happens right now.
I would be interested in knowing, how much of the revenue for the village comes from businesses versus, the residents.
I thought we didn't have a taxation on the businesses, it's on the employees.
That, and we get the
We do
income
not.
tax, but we don't.
From the employees. What about the real estate taxes? Our portion of the real estate taxes would be.
And Jen, I'm just looking through the charters that our friend Shelley here has printed, and I mean, some of them do address some of these stuff, so it might be worth going through and seeing what they've said, right, what's existing in there. I mean, two of the three do, so.
We mentioned earlier that there are whole sections of a lot of these charters that seem to be more or less boilerplate and kind of standardized. I can't promise that I would have anything done by next week, but as a kind of slightly longer term project, I'm willing to start that process of dividing out between standardized language and specialized language in charters.
Do we wanna put the charter like on the group drive or
Yeah.
whatever, so everybody takes a piece of it or something and.
So there's already a folder waiting for the document named charter.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is I'm willing to kind of get that ball rolling.
I think needs to be done.
We'll put like
Yeah, 'cause
headings in there at least.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause they
That's
do
my idea.
follow the
That way it's at
standard.
least started.
Yeah, because there are a lot of things that we'll just leave like it's state law, but there are other things we know we want to address.
Also, once it started, my brain will calm down quite a bit. So,
It makes you feel better than absolute.
Yep.
But I think that
The structure.
I think that's a good idea.
So first of all, I think we have to decide what form we're gonna go with, though. And go with specifically, don't you?
Some things I don't know that you do. So there's most of the charters, and this is just me, I mean, anybody else who's read through them. A lot of them have things like utilities.
Right. They're
Doesn't
going to
matter the
be,
form of
yeah.
government, it's something that is addressed in all of them. So I think those are the
Right.
things we're looking
So
for.
in the end, though, we'll make that decision now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we definitely will, but
Yeah, because the meat of, I think the meat of what we're gonna be doing is defining responsibilities, job descriptions,
yeah, I think,
you know,
But somewhere I read in what we've gotten from, like, the Ohio Municipal League, did say that one of the first decisions was to
Yeah.
decide what the form of government is.
I don't think we should dance around it very much longer.
No.
well, yes, yeah, I was gonna
Okay,
say,
I
I
mean,
think
We've
everybody's
got
trying
three,
to
and I'll do
avoid it.
research, and if we get that one, we
Agreed.
eliminate that, we're down to two, and then we just have to decide if it's gonna be
agreed.
council mayor or council manager.
But I think to sum up to Kelly's point, that while we're doing the research to try to figure it out, there's no reason that we can't also knock out these other little things so they're not just piling up working for later.
Yeah, the council's gonna be part of it no matter what, so.
Yeah.
I agree. So yeah, I can get something probably within 2 or 3 weeks. I can have a good working document.
Okay.
Ready to go for everybody.
Alright. So far, just to review kind of the action items we have out there, because I think that we're starting to stall a little bit.
I want it.
Yes. We've got Jen and Pam and Paul and Dick are gonna work on draft of questions to get feedback, with the goal of getting feedback from current and past council members in so much as we are able, via written questions. We're looking into how to interview non-elected employees to get their feedback on what they need out of the government. Jen, you're actually specifically talking about literally the availability of a human being to talk to another human being,
Correct.
coordinating that. Questions
Correct.
aside, just literally the availability.
Correct.
Let's see here. Nina, you were gonna look into demographics. Brian, in addition to being our technical guru and uploading all sorts of minutes and audio files, we are going to look into giving us a high-level presentation of our current government and also current budget and 5-year forecast.
I'm doing presentations on those too. Or am I- okay,
Passing around the
that's
piece of
fine.
paper is fine. I mean, just,
That's fine. I got it.
yes. If you want to make a PowerPoint and turn off the lights.
Song
and
in the
turn
background.
around,
Music.
It's fine.
I'll bring popcorn.
I'm down for that. And then Kelly, you're gonna work on just breaking out this boilerplate. It doesn't matter what the form of government is. Everybody has utilities, that sort of thing. Did I miss anything? Because we talked about a lot of things, a lot of great discussion. I don't know that I got them all. Evan?
Right back. I mean, you hit all the major things.
I do have one question,
Yeah, then.
just sort of put the background. If we put in an administrative level, and I believe we have one, that the gentleman, Eric, is that the name he said, he does the planning or whatever. And if these people are full-time employees, remember, the village also has to pay for the PERS, healthcare benefits, and so, I mean, when we're thinking about putting people in, you also have to think about what the taxpayer is gonna have to support down the road. And so it's like, how many departments do you need? And I'm looking forward to hearing what we currently do, because,
I apologize, I have to leave.
oh, we should be value for
All
money.
right.
Bye, Paul.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that something that we could get from the current administration,
Well, that'd
salary
probably,
costs?
that'd probably be in the current budget.
Oh, duh, yeah.
We're just talking about it.
Sorry,
We
I
were
was-
discussing.
Microsoft emailed me that I had weird activity on one of my accounts, but it was just, all my activities are weird. What was the question?
Right, no, we were just talking about, Deborah pointed out that we need to consider, if we're gonna be talking about things like an administrator, that we have to pay people if we want them to have a full-time employed job, and Shelley brought up, well, what do we pay people now, given with the budget, and
Yeah.
that's the circle we came.
And we realistically, if we were to have a city manager, it would have, it can't just be a lowball number if we want to get a good city manager. Like,
Yeah.
this is someone who went to school for this and has experience with it.
And
You'll
and
pay
keep-
them to
keep
do
that
it.
person.
Yeah.
Yes,
Most, I
yeah.
believe,
Yeah.
most city managers actually don't go to school first. I mean, you can have like a public administration degree. I mean, I worked with a number of them.
Okay.
Mostly you're coming up through the ranks of city government. So you have like a police commissioner or like somebody who worked at like the head of the chief firefighter would be like would be a vice city.
I was only going from personal experience. I've
No,
known
I-
several people who went and got degrees
Right.
for the purpose of
And
becoming city
The
planners.
salary usually runs between 40K and 200K, somewhere in there.
That's
So
a
it's
big
it's a
range.
big range.
That's a great
Yeah, in my previous researching, I came across an organization that was like the
Oh, yeah.
Civic Association of City Managers or something. They may have something that is like a salary survey. I'll
Something
see if
about
I can-
also might want to keep in mind, the city managers generally only stay in a position for about 2 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Before they move on.
Yeah.
Bigger city. bigger-
Short
Well,
lived.
yeah, and cities are constantly poaching each other's managers,
Yeah.
so you gotta be very careful about that sort of thing.
That could work out in your favor. I mean, if you don't like the guy, 2 to 6 years
Yeah.
average, it's gonna work out.
In other words, there are a bunch of them are rejecting, moving.
Well, yeah, and, I mean, you'd have,
Like,
there's
like
a lot,
school administrators.
yeah, there's a lot to do about interviews and whatnot, keeping them kind of secret, but, because if your city manager is interviewing outside your city, then it's something to worry about, so.
All right.
Don't have to worry about that if you have a mayor.
So I'm going to jump.
But city managers can come from anywhere, so.
I'm going to jump to a couple other items for discussion that we had. But before I do that, were there any other action items, pieces of feedback on anything that was presented from past action items that we wanted to discuss, talk about, hash out? Any other thoughts?
Are we full up on our commission numbers?
No,
Has anyone,
Has anybody heard?
no, but the village update only came out this week, right?
Yeah, right.
And then it only just went on our website last night. So,
Have we considered posting on Facebook?
well, we posted to Facebook. Go look at I didn't read your post, so you can. I'm sorry.
Of anybody at this table, Brian.
how many likes did your post get?
I mean, it's funny actually,
So-
between the MPCA and like the MI
I'm sorry.
page, the MPCA page got, I think, like 1, maybe 2.
Mhm.
The MI page got a little more.
Good.
It's a little bit more active. Could be. So to answer your question, Sid, we've posted for it. We haven't heard anything back yet.
And what do we do if nobody applies?
I know of at least one person who is intending to apply.
Because we need 15.
Yes.
Right.
We
And
have to
I
have
think that I know one person who's intending to apply as well.
Don't know that I've actually read anything that says if 15 people don't apply, the commission dissolves or anything like
Yeah.
that.
No, I
But
saw,
I-
that's why they gave this.
So in the sense of we have to, I don't think I think the answer to that is actually no. We do not have to have 15.
We have to
It's,
keep-
there are 15 seats.
Right.
And we fill as many of them as we can.
Okay. That takes.
And make a really good effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, we shouldn't stop per se, but yeah, I don't think we gotta kill ourselves.
All right. New items for discussion. I had 2 items that we have not discussed yet. These aren't parking lot, these are new. I take that back. We did talk about how best to engage with voters to get feedback. I don't know if there's any new thoughts on that. We tabled it last time a little bit, and I wanted to bring it back up. The other one is guidelines for meeting interactions from guests as people hopefully start attending more. Thank you, Tony, I see you. Do we want to have some sort of guidelines? I know council meetings have the green cards. I don't know
We
how
have
that
to have
works.
guidelines.
But I feel like we need to start establishing guidelines before we have a full house. So those two kind of link into each other. So if we engage with voters to get more voter interaction, how do we, what are our guidelines?
So what is it?
Oh, okay.
Well, one of the things, I know that council often has very strict kinds of guidelines, but there are times where there's somebody in the audience that has information that you want to hear from. So it's almost, I don't know if it's possible, but that we could turn to somebody that's in the audience and specifically address that person and say, what da-da-da-da-da, and they can then answer that. We can have a discussion with that person. But somebody in the audience can't just decide to start talking. They, and give their opinion without being recognized and invited.
I need to clarify something. Are we talking about,
All the thousands of people that want to come.
are we talking about our meetings, or are we talking about meetings that we will be having to discuss what we're actually doing? Like or both?
Both, you can pick whichever one you want to start with or go with. I mean,
So,
we will need both, but I think the more long-term one is going to be our meetings
I
here.
think virtually no one will be coming to these meetings. I think we'll have probably have a better turnout for what I thought we had decided would be smaller meetings, right? To kick around the hot ticket items,
yeah, we could talk about
multiple smaller meetings, not large town hall meetings that's.
Right.
We had talked about doing that for the form of government questions, didn't we?
Yes, yes, and that is the hot ticket item, and I think that we should allow the villagers to talk to us about that. And,
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that.
right, and
So
so I was
Discuss it.
thinking concerning that, like, I wouldn't think, not these meetings, but a meeting where people get to talk about what they feel about form of government, I would think that would be, they're telling us. We're
Yes.
So
not
I feel like-
necessarily
so-
running something or needing to control them terribly.
So has anybody been to, and I know that Diane Strick gave some presentations about the buildings, the research she'd done, here's the information we have, and then asked for feedback. It ran pretty well. She got the information out, everybody sat and attentively listened, and then there was a Q&A session where people were able to give feedback. Mayhem didn't ensue. I felt like is well received in that format. So I don't know if that's how we're envisioning those going, like here's the different ones, what are your thoughts? Or if you're just more envisioning like, let's sit down with a cup of coffee and just everybody go. I mean,
I thought we already discussed this last meeting and decided we were gonna do sort of informational sessions with basically what you described, where we present everything and then have a QA at the end.
Yeah.
With a very limited time frame for citizen comments.
Yeah.
I thought that's what we'd already,
I don't know that
Sort
we
of
landed on that,
decided.
but I
Yeah.
wanted to make
that
sure
was my
that we,
recollection that you had.
I wanted to make sure we agree on that or discuss that further if there's other thoughts, ideas, input.
No, I think
I mean, we
that's,
obviously want to put.
that's how,
people,
yeah,
right, we're gonna
yeah,
vote
for
on charter.
those, but I do
And
think that
that's
we
where they
need,
would be.
we need to adopt a process for this meeting, because anybody who is kind enough to show up should have an opportunity to speak their piece from what they've heard. I think, right, we should never keep people from being able to address us, right? But I think that in this space, to Pam's point, if there is somebody here who we know is coming because they are full of good information, I think the chair of the meeting can invite them into the meeting, right? I think that is procedurally how that sometimes works, right? So the chair recognizes, resident black coat over there, please join us, and,
Tony's right there, you can just use him.
oh, I know I could
I don't want Tony, I don't want Tony to feel pressured.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't prepared to do.
But, right, and please join us and, share the information that you've come to share. That's one way.
But how do we know that they have information?
Well, I think that in that situation, it would have to be somebody who
Has been invited.
has been invited or there's been outside conversation, right? We all talk to our neighbors. And if my neighbor I know has a great idea and I want to make sure that they get it in front of everybody, that's how I would say, hey, come to the meeting. I'll let Rainey know to invite you in, and that's how that happens, right? Beyond that, if that's not the source or that's not the way, then I think at the end of each one of these meetings, we should reserve
A few minutes.
Absolutely.
5 to 10 minutes and allow people to, similar to council, it's a citizens comment period. Do you have, citizens here, you have your 3 minutes.
I like the idea of inviting in, but just to define what the topic is, because they might start with the topic and then want to start talking about garbage pickup and the lakes and.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, ma'am.
Right, yeah, so,
Yeah.
so limit the invitation, resident, black coat, please join us to share what you know on this topic. And if they stray from that, then they can be excused as well as invited.
Are we flexible enough if, let's say, at our regular meeting, people are lots of people are here and they're up in arms about something real or imagined, are we flexible enough to give, as many people as would like to address us the time to do so?
Yeah.
Like, one person can talk to us for 5 minutes or 10
We
minutes.
have the,
Three
we,
people can.
we have the space until 10 PM. Theoretically, we can adjourn the meeting and
Okay.
allow for a Q&A session afterwards. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
I
As
think-
long as somebody can stay, have the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
I-
we am.
And on that note, I actually do have to leave. Sorry, guys.
On
Have a
that
good
note,
night, and
Sorry.
I'm jealous.
That was a nice segue, that was.
I would prefer not to have an open forum where anything can come up and people have a right to talk on anything. I think it should be charter related.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Yes.
not to air your grievances
Yeah.
about
Not
the
that,
rest
not
of
that
everything.
open.
Yeah,
Not that open.
yeah.
So,
See ya.
That's
I'm gonna
all.
get-
Sorry.
You
Yeah.
too.
no, thank you for specifying that, Nick, absolutely. So I'm
No
already.
recipe sharing.
Aw.
Does
They're
that
real
happen? Don't ask
So-
that. So I already put in every agenda, open discussion and Q&A. And I originally intended that to mean us, but there's no reason that couldn't mean, okay, on the items that we've talked about today, is there, anyone else?
I put another bullet in there for citizen comment, just so that it's.
Okay.
clear.
Charter related.
Well, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a time limit is, unfortunately, when we open it to citizens' comments, we do need to set an expectation that there is
Let's have it be longer than
3.5.
Who's gonna have the music that starts playing to let them know their time's up, like the Oscars?
We'll all start humming at the same time.
Wrong music, not the Jeopardy music, the Oscar music. You guys got the wrong.
Oh, the
Okay.
wrap it up music.
Yes, wrap it up music.
Citizen comments are always often that there's no back and forth, there's no,
Yeah.
and I would like to see the ability to have there be some back and
Well, I think the back and, here, in
forth.
that.
Yeah, in here, right, yeah. So if the citizen gets up and they're talking and they ask us a question, we should be able to answer it. and-
Because we haven't specifically adopted Robert's
Oh,
rules.
I know. I just know, I think that's great until it becomes a problem.
So
And then we,
what-
and then we can, as a group, come back to it, right? Because, you
So
know,
what if we call it citizens' comments and concerns, or citizens' feedback?
yeah, that's fine. But, as I understand it, the village didn't used to have a 3-minute rule for citizens' comments
No,
at meetings until
that's
it became a problem.
That's exactly right.
Till the torch and pitchfork people.
Showed up, that's
Well,
exactly right.
person.
That's exactly right.
All right, so
So-
let's put that, all right. And then engaging with voters to get feedback, let's circle back to that. So I don't think we're there yet, but like I said, I really liked those presentations about the building. I think that we could get to a point where we've got some presentations that we could have meetings for, 3 or 4 meetings, different days, different times, so we can hit all different people and availabilities, right? And just give,
I'd say kind of like Brian had suggested with this person on this type and this person on that type.
maybe, I mean, I don't know that I want to pin it down to which person necessarily, but
Okay.
just like the general concept, right? Of
Okay.
presenting information in that format. I don't know if you have information in that format yet, but I think that that's a reasonable expectation of voters of us, and we can meet that, right?
It was nice for you to put it in the context of what Diane had done and that did work well. And it was, yeah. It was good.
All right, any other thoughts for engaging with voters? I want to make sure everybody has their chance to ask questions. We want to get their buy-in, right? At the end of the day, we're putting together a document that we need them to vote on, so
Well, we want to get their buy-in, but they also just flatly need to be informed.
Yep.
So they can decide whether they're buying in or not.
right,
So,
or they're educated vote against it.
Exactly, exactly.
so we've basically hit all the internet buttons we can hit. So apart from canvassing the neighborhoods, like what else is there?
Canvassing the neighborhoods.
Okay, I think that's what everyone was dancing around. So I think I would just throw it out there.
I mean, I don't know
Are we
how,
going, you know what?
I don't know how we're gonna get away from it.
You mean like actually knocking on doors?
Knocking on doors and inviting people, giving people the dates for meetings. And just telling them briefly what kinds of things would be discussed.
I don't have time to go walk around the neighborhood.
I
and
know.
knock on doors.
Most
But-
people don't, and
And if I was a village person,
I wouldn't have time to answer.
I
the door.
elected you guys to do the job. So do the job you were elected to do, and I'll come,
So don't
Yeah, so
knock on
here's-
Deb's door.
Here's the, yeah.
It obviously worked well, she's here.
I'm knocking on your door tomorrow night.
She never answers her door when I knock. so.
my doorbell doesn't ring, so he's not.
It's just.
So, no, what was I gonna say? Oh, so flyers work, but flyers cost money. That would be, right, I don't think that we would get much joy or love out of knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're having these meetings, because that is resource intensive of us, and that is, not always well received by the person answering the door, but, I mean, I think that we have always found good success with flyers, right? It lets people know, that they've got it. With 12 sets of hands or 15 sets of hands, delivering getting them out there isn't particularly onerous. And how much were you just printed out enough one-sided flyers for everybody, and that was $90. So that's the expense, right? Every time we want to put a flyer on everybody's door, it's $90, right?
I think
But is
Jen
the
did it for
inform-
60 or 70.
Jen, the one that Jen did most recently was double-sided, and it was $150.
That's right, it was double-sided.
So out of curiosity, is the information that we want them to digest flyer, I'm making up my own words, flyerable?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, is it something that can be relayed on the flyer?
I mean, you can put all kinds of good stuff on a flyer.
So here's a question. I know that the Villager and the Village Update used to have like profiles, like people in it. Is there a possibility to get, a charter member, a commission member profile sort of thing, like meet your charter member sort of, is that even if feasible?
What's the benefit of it?
Well, I mean, it would get the information out there, and you could mention when our next meetings are and whatnot.
So-
I mean, because our meetings will be in there.
I believe the mayor has already agreed to give us some amount of space in the village update, right? Where we can advertise our upcoming meetings and the website.
So my question is, if we're already doing that and that's coming out, what extra utility do flyers provide?
I don't know.
The agreement was if there was space, that was the agreement.
Yeah, well, I suspect there will always be space, right?
Yeah,
It's, they went,
but I think if we're looking for buy-in, having a profile of some friendly face on the charter commission staring at, our village, our fellow citizens saying, hey, this is Pam Parks Curry, she's lived in the village for X number of years, she's been on the council, and this is Sid, I think that getting them to know us better will not only spur buy-in, but also have more people show up, perhaps, I don't know.
Actually, I think the research shows that that kind of connection is.
That's so too.
What's your thoughts, Sid?
Having worked on communications over the years, the frustrating part is that there are so many chances that people have to find information if they're interested. And I agree that the flyers has to be, to me, the most effective way we're ever going to be with all the other things that they can find out through websites. But mainly with the seniors who don't do computers. But I totally agree with the flyer idea. We should spend the money to do that.
I think Diane did a half sheet when she was trying to get.
Yeah. I don't know anything about how much cheaper it is to do a half sheet over a full sheet. It could be half.
And it was mostly,
But-
it mostly
The
was
expense is
to,
worth it no matter what it is.
Yeah,
just to say, here's the time and date for the meetings that.
So do we think that there's any other method other than, we've got the internet covered, we've got meetings covered, flyers, we'd have to figure out what we want to put on them, but that's a possibility, and it's had good success, so it's worth remembering, but Are
A
there any?
flatbed truck and a bullhorn?
That's what I was gonna say.
Robo diver.
No. That's the way
How
they
about the
used to
people
do
who
it.
are hard of hearing?
I bet
Flatbed
you-
truck bullhorn.
I bet you I can find an internet utility.
Can we get a car with a funny horn and like? Okay, I think that's probably pretty good for now.
Yeah.
All right,
It's the
parking
seniors,
lots.
I think we have to worry about as far as communication.
I think so too. I mean,
If we could piggyback on any things that are naturally happening, if we, now, the carriage rides are coming up, I think, and it's too soon, but there'll be a lot of people in the community building, et cetera. If we were having something at that time, having things there to give them more flyers.
Oh, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So, kind of keeping that as an idea when there are that many, but if there are some things.
well, that's a good example.
We could just make up a little sign that we put up. Remember to watch or come to our charter meetings, and everybody has to see it when they walk in.
Do they have any senior activities here at the community center, or is there a place where a lot of seniors in this
Not
community?
that I'm aware of. We've had some sing-alongs in the past, but not this year.
Yeah. Last one wasn't it Jen?
Yeah,
Hawkins'
yeah.
uncle?
Ray.
I
yeah.
came to that. I took
Right.
the day off.
Ray and I are playing for it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, we've got 20 minutes left. I'm just gonna throw out the parking lot items. We already just hit on one, how to communicate with all residents regardless of technology. There was supposed to be some further discussion on how this charter works in regards to existing laws. I think we touched on that one as well. It doesn't address the carries on. Most of the charters seem to have language in them about ordinances carrying through. So that might be one of the things that Kelly just picks out is all charters have this language so that it's clear. Corporate tax, that was up for discussion, but I don't think we're at that point. And demographic information, which Nina, you took. So that was all the parking lot items that I had. Anything else that we want to just put out there to discuss at future meetings? We don't have a lot of time now, but.
So here, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier today, but, I would love it if we could, in the next meeting or a soon meeting, go through, in the OML guideline document that we have, it has sort of like the usual format of a charter, section by section. And just to talk through each one of those quickly. It doesn't have to be like a deep dive, just what is this? And do we think this is something that is, like we've called things hot ticket items or not?
Right.
And then the things that are not, those we should maybe assign out to subcommittees now and just get them done. Like I feel like that
That's a
could
good
be,
idea.
a subcommittee could take something, so the one that keeps on coming to me and bugs the hell out of me, all it is a section that defines your municipal boundaries,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I feel like that should be done already. We should have a document with that section and that should be done.
Is that what Kelly's looking to do? Kind of the same thing that you're saying?
I think it's.
Maybe, it sounds like, but I think it should be a discussion with the room to define out and then create
And then
subcommittees.
farm it out.
And then
to
farm
the
it out.
subcommittee.
And those subcommittees
Define
can-
it as a group, farm it out.
Yeah, and then bring it back, each subcommittee could say, okay, this is what we have, have a reading of it. And then adopt, don't adopt, amend, right, and then put it in a living document that will move forward. That's kind of how I would love to see some progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you say that, what we were,
That
that you want to go through?
Yeah,
And
that's-
it's
I was
in
gonna
the
say,
Ohio Municipal League,
I typed in abbreviation, it means nothing.
yeah,
That's 15, am I
the
looking at it?
Oh, yeah,
municipal charters in
Thank you.
Ohio, that document,
Yeah, she's got it. She has it in her hand.
yeah,
That's fine.
that one.
So,
In there is a section, if I'm recalling correctly,
Isn't it
yeah,
starting on page?
chapter 11,
yeah,
right, I think.
well, it talks about.
I think, on page 47, it's,
It's like
choice of
40.
form of government, the mayor, you need to talk about the term of office, the qualifications, the veto power. then the city manager who appoints it, tenure, powers. for
40.
council.
I'm getting
What is
this.
47.
Page 47.
Yeah.
47.
It'll be the PDF 47, but it'll be the,
And it starts with the choice of form of
It's-
government.
it's after the forms of government. And then it goes on.
See, like they have this new Lexington.
So the following decisions are required. Got it.
Yeah,
That's what you're looking for. What's required?
Right.
Does every one of the, and I haven't read them all, do all the charters follow section 2, section 3?
but I'm not sure.
Sort of.
So when they say, I
Two
don't
of
see
them,
4,
I-
5, and 6 here.
Right.
I think it's
Right,
very,
and some has 12, I mean, it just depends.
Yeah, there are some of them that say something like anything that we don't address in this charter continues to be governed by the laws of the state of Ohio as before. And then like hardly, this is a new, section 101, name and boundary.
That's
Yeah.
The municipal corporation existing as a village of New Lexington, and then it just goes on.
I haven't seen any of them without the name and boundary section. front
That's
and
name and,
center.
well,
You
yeah,
get a chance.
yeah, I guess it does,
Bexley
yeah.
had a really interesting charter that was a little differently laid out, where they start talking about the executive branch and the judicial branch and then the legislative branch, and they took the same things that others did, the council, the mayor,
Mhm.
etc., but really organized it and have some, it's quite nice.
You like the way they like.
I
do
did,
that. Me
just,
too.
um,
What did you think of Johnstown's name?
You know, I thought it was, very practical. That's the best way I can describe it. The language was simple, it wasn't overly, arcane or anything.
Sorry to interrupt you, Pam.
No, and I can, since Brian showed me how, I can just upload Bexley's to the OneDrive, and then people can check it out.
I'll give you a chance to practice uploading then.
Yes, I will.
There you go.
All right. As far as, because I think some of these are very good, the things that we've been passing around.
Mhm.
Do we want to, what's everyone else's thoughts on putting these on that OneDrive as well? Is there a home for these? I haven't, I freely admit I haven't explored everything.
yeah, you could, the village ain't using their 5 gigs, so
Yeah, bits are cheap.
might as well,
Pick it up there.
might as well fill it up.
I'll send you what I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Because I think it's very good information. I also think the paper in my house, either it's drawn on, eaten, or thrown away.
got it.
And no, that was in that order.
Usually not even more than one of those at a time. It's a wide variety of choices.
She didn't recycle.
Once it's
I
been
don't know
eaten.
what it is, but yes.
Right.
The dog's already eaten one Christmas present in my house, Pam. That's how we are.
I have.
You met my kids, you get it now.
I have a ton of paper.
Really?
I mean, I have, I don't even know how much paper, it's a bunch.
I love it.
Note to self, Jen can print.
You should.
I mean, just plain.
I
Worth
think
it. All right, anything
You can
else?
share.
Let's go on to, I think that, Brian, I think that's a good ask and a good point to the guide. Let me reach out to Kelly, who's no longer in the building, and see if that's what he was thinking to do anyways.
Okay.
And maybe you'll get your wish, you don't have to think any harder about it.
Yeah, that's the best part, when I can give a great idea and somebody else does it.
It'll help focus, it'll help focus a lot if we get that.
Yeah. All right, so open discussion Q&A. We already got a volunteer to describe what we have in the park today. I don't have anything else under that comment or section for me. Anybody else have any just open thoughts, questions?
I do have a question. Did I read somewhere that someone was going to chat with the current administration,
Yes.
the council about costs and such as that?
Brian's gonna look up the budget
Okay,
and a 5-year plan. So
Okay.
figure out current costs and get real numbers that way. And then for council, we were going to we're working on it. We're not there yet, but we're working on coming up with basically written questions to get feedback.
Oh, no, that's not what I thought I had read
And
somewhere,
then for,
that the question of
How do we
whether
spend
we're
it?
limited
Oh.
in scope of money and. It's okay, I didn't make myself clear.
that, you're right, that does still need to happen, but I believe that conversation was pending a little bit of Kelly's feedback on talking to Jean.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
that
it
okay,
was.
maybe
That's what-
that
that's
was-
Exactly right.
I just had a remembrance of it.
But yeah, that is still
Okay.
a call out.
Have we gotten to the place where we discussed the possibility of, like an open meeting? Are we decide maybe when we want to do that?
I don't know if we're to that point yet, so I
Yeah.
don't know that we have anything to present as far as.
See, I'm thinking about what should be on the flyers, what's in my head. You know, like if you're gonna put something out, you can talk about the meetings, you can talk about maybe if you decided on an open meeting, and I think you ought to put a contact person on there with a phone number, or 2 or 3. So that people, the seniors I'm thinking of mostly, if they get this flyer and they have questions, and they can't make it to the meeting, they can call somebody.
So on the note of phone number, I put my phone number down on the advert that we put in the village update.
Yes.
Thank you. Upon further reflection, I don't know that I want to keep putting my personal cell phone number out there. Not because I don't mind people calling me, but because I have a special needs child who took 5 years of therapy to teach him the phone number, and I don't want to have to risk changing it and doing another 5 years of therapy. So
So we,
I'm
well-
looking into alternatives for either a different phone number for me, or if we can get maybe a charter commission phone number or phone or something as a central point. That way it's not 15 different people's phone numbers, but maybe just one phone number for the charter commission, and either the chair
Is
can
it-
have it, or we could pass the phone to the vice chair. And
is there somebody they can call to get a person?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So some
that's
way
the
that
way
there's
it
always a
is.
person, and there's not the pressure of, well, there's these 15 numbers. Who do I call? Who knows what?
Oh, yeah,
We
right.
just got
Just-
a charter phone
Just
number.
someone who can say, if you have a question, we can either answer or tell you, get
Mhm.
somebody.
Or can I call you back with an answer, because I don't know
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so looking into that path after further thought.
I mean, I don't mind my phone number. I used to do it all the time when we were doing membership. I was happy to have people call me,
Okay.
That means new members.
Alright, let me go that route. Yeah, let me see what I can figure out about having just, like I said, a charter phone specifically, even if it's just my husband having another phone for a plan for a year. If it's $10, I don't care. But
That's what I was thinking, I have to go out and buy a phone for somebody else, and I've got,
if you can get buy one, get one free.
Get a
I'm just
bird
saying.
I can get
But the thought occurred to me after I thought deeper about having my phone.
I
out
would
there.
really rather it be Sid
I don't mind.
than
You're my
a
phone.
charter phone. I would really rather it be,
Call
if
center.
he's volunteering.
Yeah, I get enough phone numbers anyway, called,
All right,
selling me insurance and.
right.
I don't care.
Tell them about the charter.
Well, yeah, oh, sure.
All right.
But I mean, I think,
No, Sid's phone number's not good. All right. So 7 minutes left. I don't really have anything else official, and then you're gonna work on minutes, sending them out to everybody. Everybody has an action item. Try to log into your email. And let us know if it doesn't work. And when I get home, I'll send out the instructions on how to do that.
Was anybody gonna mention to the village that we don't have access to the internet? Or not the internet, but the email that.
Yeah,
Wait, let's
let's adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
We're using
Opposed?
using Mr. Roberts.
Shall someone turn off the little